Hello,
Hi.
and welcome to the 10 pointers in the 8th fetter. This is the last lesson in the 8th fetter, and it's the lesson that is useful for you no matter if you have done all the curriculum from 1 to 8, or if you are circling back to the 8th fetter during your exploration through all the fetters. What we're going to do is ask you 10 pointers, talk about 10 pointers that are super, super relevant when you're working with the 8th fetter. And the first pointer is, do you know there's not something wrong with chasing awakening and the need to see yourself as a part of something bigger? And this is helping you if you at any point have been judgmental towards yourself for being a seeker. Very often when we talk with people or we hear people, they have like this judgmental tone about how long they have been a seeker. They have this judgment about that chasing that is happening where, for example, they have seen through self, they have been in that honeymoon period where everything was just blissful and wonderful. And now they have kind of lost it and they're back to chasing that feeling again. And what we want to say is that there's nothing wrong with that. It's completely fine having that urge or that chasing, because the chasing and the urge is not real. It's just telling you, it's an indication of where you are in your mindset right now. It's an indication of what is actually happening in you right now. And there cannot possibly be anything wrong with that. The chasing is very often a 4-5 thing that is happening, and it's very often that whatever is present right now is not what I want. I want something else. It's also the other part. Do you want to say something about this before I go to the other part?
No, go ahead.
The other part of it is also that there's nothing wrong with being in that bliss bubble that we're in. That when all the feathers have fallen, all the feathers up to the 8th feather has fallen, we're in a honeymoon period, or we're in a state of bliss where everything just makes sense, where everything is beautiful and expansive, and we feel connected with other people, and we have no reactions anymore. There's nothing that we wish to be any different, or there's no striving or anything. Everything is just beautiful and wonderful and really makes sense. And there's that sense of, this is what they talked about. And it's a beautiful place to be, and it's where a lot of traditions, they end when you're there. That is the goal, to get to that point. So it's wonderful and beautiful, and there's no need for you to move on in any way if that is where you're at. The only reason it would be an idea for you to move on is when you start to oscillate between being in that bliss state or being in that happy place and into doubt or into judgment or into any of the other types of identification that we have. If that is you, that you feel that it's like a seesaw that you're sitting on, then it's a good idea to really start to look into what is that bliss state actually.
It's also important because a lot of times people will, even when they're just seeing through the first fetter, they'll have this kind of cascading experience where it seems for a while to take with it a whole lot of the other fetters. And so sometimes after seeing through just the first fetter, people will experience this kind of 8th fetter bliss and expansiveness and all of that. And the problem is when it gets taken to be real and something permanent, that okay, now I've done it, this must be what it's going to always be like. And then all of a sudden it could be days, it could be months, it could be years later, and then all of a sudden you're kind of starting to feel reactive again. You're starting to feel more identified in different ways again. You're starting to notice different polarities that weren't there before. And it's just to recognize that, okay, it's not that you've done something wrong. It's not that you've lost something. It's just a temporary state that you were in. And now things are going back to where you need more investigation in order to be able to see through these things more consistently. But it's still reinforcing that idea that even if you feel like you have gone through all 7 fetters before it and you're in this wonderful place, it's still a moving, changing dynamic that just be honest and be aware that.
And also, we're also going to talk about that in a moment, but it's also that part that there's nothing permanent.
Exactly.
There's nothing permanent. There can't be a permanent shift. You cannot have an experience that stays exactly like that forever. It's not part of the human nature. We are constantly striving and chasing something, and when we get it, then we are happy and blissful and content, and then it starts to get, the novelty wears off, and then we start to chase something else. So it's not part of the human experience to be in a permanent state at any point ever. There's nothing in our biochemistry. It's the same with that you can get the receptors in the body get used to a drug that you take, or if you take vitamin C in a certain dosage, then the body just adapts to that, and you would need to change it. There's changing happening constantly, and nothing can be permanent, and nothing can stay the same.
We'll talk more about that in a little.
Yeah.
A few more questions down the road.
Thank you.
Second pointer. Do you still have lingering expectations about what awakening is and feels like?
Yeah.
And it's such a big issue for people because we have huge variety of traditions which, in the past, maybe you were only introduced to one of them. And so then you don't have a lot of variation to expect. You kind of know what you've been taught. You have certain rituals or certain practices that you do with an expectation that you're going to get something out of it. And if it conformed to that, congratulations, you've done it correctly. Nowadays, we have so many different traditions feeding into YouTube and retreats and all sorts of teachings and books and everything that people use. And then we hear experiences from people and their unique individual variations of what they have gone through. And then it builds up all these expectations that I think I should be experiencing all of these different things, or at least I want to experience this one and maybe not that one because that one sounds terrible, but I definitely want a part of this one. And there is so much variation because there are differences of traditions, differences of practices, differences of different approaches, different personal biology, different past histories, different proclivities, different, you being a fearful person is going to have different approaches and different experiences to somebody who's like, a skydiver who is just like on their weekends or just dropping ayahuasca. Like, there are differences of what people have gone through and the way that their brains work and everything else.
It's like the worst that you can imagine, that a skydiver that is dropping ayahuasca every weekend.
It's a pretty fearless thing, right? Like you're jumping out of a plane and you're like breaking down all walls of
every weekend.
Every weekend. Like it kind of sets you up for like, yeah, everything is fine. Like nothing's freaking me out. And then, on the flip side of that, you have somebody who like, I think the pollen count is high today. I think I'm going to stay inside. So, there are differences.
Yeah.
So you
have the fearless skydiving, ayahuasca dropping, and you got us.
And so the point of that is that if you have an idea that your experience needs to conform to a certain expectation, a certain viewpoint, a certain perspective that you have adopted because you heard somebody else say it, that is where it's really important to look into, for one thing, why you have that particular viewpoint, that this is what awakening is going to look like. This is the real thing. also why it's important for you to have it show up that way.
Mm.
Is there something that you actually feel like you're getting out of it if it is presenting in this infinite blissful state as opposed to just kind of a mundane emptiness or a mundane equanimity? Is there something where it says something about you that you have actually succeeded and achieved this thing as opposed to the other one? Really get underneath that to why it is that you feel like it should be a certain way and why you need it to be a certain way and why it's not okay if it shows up someplace, some way different.
Yeah, why is it not okay the way that it does show up?
Exactly.
That the way that it is for you. Why is that not okay? And I also want to just circle back to that comparison that we do, because you also need to take into account that some people that describe awakening, they have this colorful, psychedelic, mystical experience. In my experience, it's very often people that haven't been sitting on the cushion for 30 years, and they haven't had a meditation practice, since before they were born, and they haven't been on countless retreats and really work with this. So obviously when you do that, then suddenly everything is just becoming alive in a very, very expansive or extreme way, where if you're used to meditating and if you're used to do inquiries and looking into all these things, and you're used to sitting in nature and looking at a leaf in a different way, then the awakening in our experience is very much a small drip fed experience that just slowly expands and becomes different. And one morning you wake up, or you are at work, and somebody says something and you would normally react, and now you just don't react anymore. And then it's like, oh wow, is this it? So it's also important to look at that the ones that are having those wow psychedelic experiences, that they normally have not had anything previously.
And it's also our language is not particularly good for describing nuances of experience. And so when we describe anything outside of the ordinary, it tends to become very extraordinary very quickly.
Mystical.
It's very mystical, very wow, like having that, even just talking about things feeling somehow non-dual, non-separated, it creates, because we have such vivid imaginations, it creates so many unfathomably interesting and we can have all these ideas of what that might be like, but it doesn't mean that is what the person is talking about at all. And then there's also just to take with, we recommend taking everything with a grain of salt that you hear, because there are people who, when you're being interviewed or something, there is a human tendency to want to over exaggerate and over amplify our experiences and make them sound bigger and wilder and more impressive than they might have actually been when the person was experiencing it. It's kind of like our, we're describing the magnitude of how it felt to us as opposed to the actual reality or impressiveness of the actual state itself.
And then whatever they say in that you hear is then interpreted by you, and you put your filter on top of it.
Exactly.
So it's all of your experiences that you have had and already seen through, and all of that added to what you assume they are experiencing, and then we're sitting with this complete out of this world experience that is not what everybody's experiencing.
Yeah. And it's not to say that people don't have very psychedelic experiences, but if we get locked into the idea that everybody has to experience a certain type of moment, a certain type of shift, a certain type of seeing, a certain type of feeling for this to be what we're talking about, it's very much locking us into a box where it's
not allowing humans to be humans and people to be pure people, and us having all of our causes and conditions with us in our luggage and experiencing it in
Right.
different ways, and we need to
But
be open to
and
that.
there's also a hubris in that it sets us up as though we know what awakening even is.
Yeah.
We have no idea what this is, right? Like, we don't know. Is it mystical? Is it biological? Is it energetic? We have no idea. And so to come down on any hard line where we say that it has to look like this and everybody has to experience this is to try to make it into something try to make it into something that we understand when we don't. And the proof is really in the manifestation of it after that experience. What is your life like after you have seen something, after you've had a shift? What is it like in your everyday? And that is where you know what has been um, uh, seen and what has been integrated and what is still just a fleeting peak experience that is great to tell people about, but not actually useful in your daily life.
And it's also creating someone here that can have an experience that is different than what I just experienced just
Yeah,
before,
yeah.
which is that weaving of snapshots in and now and now and now that is weaved together into one long experience. And I am experiencing that. That is changing all the time.
Yeah, we're going to talk more about that.
Oh, we are.
Too.
Yeah,
I mean,
I
that's
forgot
kind
about
of
that.
in the coming
Okay.
teaser. But I was just going to say one last. That's all right. I was going to say one last thing about that.
I said the one
it was
here
before
that was. I thought that was the first thing.
No, it was something I was saying before that. Before you went to the one here.
Oh.
I can't remember. I don't know. That's all right.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm sure it'll come
up.
back if it's important. Oh,
Yeah.
This may or may not have been the thing, because I know I was thinking about this also. But also, if you're somebody who has experimented, sorry, if you're somebody who has experimented with psychedelics in the past, again, they are, for some people, a way of opening up and getting out of the rigidity of what we believe life has to look like, and how, like, this is the only way that life can be experienced. And for some people, it might show them glimpses of no self, or that there are, other ways of breaking down distance and how we fabricate things in real time and all that. But if that is being now held up as your marker for an awakening experience, or what awakening is like, or any of that, has to be like living on LSD 24/7, you're going to be very much disappointed.
Yeah.
It's not that. And so be aware if you are using psychedelics like that. And again, everybody is different. For some people, it's really beneficial. Other people, it's extremely detrimental. And it ends up causing like PTSD stuff for them if they have really bad trips. And, it's a bit of a gamble. But if you do, and you have had experiences that you took to be very mystical and opening and incredibly important for your spiritual journey, that's great. But just realize that those are peak experiences which are derived from an exogenous chemical, not because you are now at this level where it's always going to be like that, or that is even the goal of the...
No, it's more it's more like a metaphor. It's more like you can have, a dream when you sleep at night. You can have a dream where you're flying, and you have that feeling of openness and freedom and expansiveness. Yeah. That doesn't mean that when you awake that is how it's going to feel like to walk down Main Street. But you can have that as a metaphor of having that that unhindered feeling of freedom and expansiveness in you when you're walking down Main Street.
Yeah, really nice. Okay,
let's
move on.
Third one. Do you still believe you can become permanently awake, or that there is someone who can become awake?
That's what you were just
that was the one that I talk about. And obviously what we're pointing to is that there is no persistent self anywhere who can become permanently awake. That there's not someone that can have an experience that is freezing time, and nothing is ever moving from that state. That's not possible. Everything is moving in circles, which is like, 2 steps forward, 1 step back. And it's just what we are calling to all the time is having a present and awareness in this now, and this now, and this now. And there's none of those nows that are in any way similar or the same, because everything is changing. The light, the receptors, uptake in the digestion system makes you see things clearer, and or you're constipated both in mind and body, or there's that movement that is happening all the time. There's nothing that's permanent, not a single thing.
No. It's also it just went. There was a thing. I really am. There was a thing that was just there. It's like, boop, I'm going out the other door.
There's going to be an amendment.
Yeah.
20 pointers where we take all the things that we forgot to say.
It was just there.
Yeah, it's okay. We talked about that there's no permanent self anyway.
Yeah, there was like a subtle offshoot of that seemed really relevant, and it was a little too subtle. It just disappeared.
You want to add anything to it?
I thought so. Yeah, we'll come back to it.
Yeah, we can talk a bit about that. No, I was thinking of talking a bit about that chasing that we can have, where it feels like we are taking one step forward and one step forward and one step forward. There can also be a non-acceptance of taking those 2 steps forward and then 1 step back. That there can be an only wanting to be happy and content all the time. That when I'm awake, then there's like bliss all the time. That there's not space for anything in that. Like an inhalation also needs to have an exhalation. That the 2 steps forward also needs to have a 1 step back. Having that full acceptance of this moment right now is expressing itself the way that this moment right now is expressing itself. There's not one set in stone way that can be expressed.
Yeah. And what I was going to say is I think this also relates back to that idea that we really don't know what this even is. And if you're coming at it from the standpoint that there is a permanent way of being, we don't know. If it's purely biological, the brain is constantly taking in new information and creating new projections of what it thinks is coming up. And there are cycles of patterns of behavior that we've gotten into because of years and years of conditioning. And those things are not going to just stop overnight. The behavioral patterns don't stop overnight. Causes and conditions, people.
Yep.
But they don't just change overnight. And the idea that all of a sudden, all of your experiences, all of your way of being, whatever you have taken to be, the identified little me, and then now the big expansive I that's overseeing everything and is part of everything, as though that one experience is the only way that this mind-body organism could possibly produce experience in the world, is so short-sighted. Because again, we have no idea why it is the way that it is. And it's just locking us into the idea that we should know how things are going to be. We should know that I can lock myself into a sense of permanency, that, the sun always comes up in the morning and it always goes down in the evening. I can set my clocks by that. I can, make plans based off of that. So of course, if I feel like I am walking around and I'm breathing in the trees, I'm always going to be able to do that from now on. Like, that's where I am. And it's very short-sighted, because the way to approach this, and this is where we get to with the 10th fetter, is that complete openness to whatever the experience is in that moment, without putting any locks onto it, without shackling it with any expectations at all. That they're just, free to come and go. You can be free to be the trees, and you can be free to see a tree 100 yards away, and it's not saying that one is better than the other or that one is going to be a permanent thing.
Yeah. And it's also that not knowing. It's also about when you take the 2 steps forward, you're completely on board. That's absolutely amazing. This is what I want. Move forward, inward, upward. It's amazing. Exactly what I want. So when we take the 1 step back, we put ourselves in a position and saying, this is wrong. This shouldn't be like this. I should have another step forward, not a step back. I should move that way. How do you know that? How do you know that? In our infinite stupidity, we do not know anything.
Yeah.
So taking that step back, it's only this close that it looks like it's a step back. You need to zoom out.
Yeah.
You really need to have the overview of the entire existence of the galaxy into mind when you deem that you have taken 1 step back, and that is a bad thing. You do not know. If you look at your life, there's a lot of times where you have taken a step back from your development where it went the other way, but it turned out actually to be super, super beneficial. And it's just having that wisdom of ignorance that we do not know what seems to be a negative thing right now. It's just a judgment. It's just an opinion. And it's a very limited and ignorant opinion and judgment that we cannot put place on anything.
And it's also filtered from that perspective of a narration, of a narrative that is imposing an idea of one who had it yesterday, who was one with all the trees and flying like a bird through the sky, and this one now who is somehow bound to this terrible earthly body and
I have a headache and I just stomped my foot.
Yeah. So it's the idea that is the same person who was over there doing this other thing, and it's drawing that thread through.
We're going to talk about that in a moment as well. Yeah. I think we're circling back to this in a moment.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. 4th pointer. Have you realized that there can't be one huge shift that is consistent since nothing is?
Yeah.
And we've kind of already hinted at this, or maybe maybe more than hinted at it, because because there's so everybody again has their own path forward. And for some people, it is a ton of little teeny tiny shifts that are just little glimpses, little insights, little momentary, ooh, that's interesting, a little something that moves in the perceptual field. And then for some people, it is more abrupt, but usually, again, because they generally have not been acquainted with either meditation practices or perhaps non-dual or no-self concepts or ideas. The more we have a conceptual knowledge of things before we experience it, the less jarring the insight tends to be, because you've already tilled the soil, you've already planted the seeds, you've already set things up for it to grow, and now it's not really surprising that you have an eggplant growing where you planted an eggplant seed. It's only jarring when you have never done anything to your backyard, and you come out and the next day all of a sudden you have a whole garden sprouting there. It's very confusing. So
that's a really good metaphor.
Thank you for that. So bearing that in mind, even if you have had one of those really big shifts, it is just that moment of surprise. It's that moment of shock. It's where something suddenly is seen differently. Again, similar to what people get on certain psychedelic substances, where all of a sudden things are different than I've ever taken them to be. I haven't realized that this was a possibility. Oh, wow. And maybe it will have some knock-on effects where you're perceiving things change going forward, where you'll have more openness with things, where you'll have less reactivity. Whatever it happens to be that you have had that insight about, absolutely can have more and more spiraling effects going forward. Otherwise, we wouldn't be doing any of this. But the idea that, as we said, that one shift is consistent, and that like that is going to be the hallmark of your experience from now on, is limiting us back into what we talked about with that idea of the limited one who is having the experience, who is locked into a sense of permanence where it will always be this way. Now that I have seen this thing, now that everything is two-dimensional, it will always be two-dimensional. It can never go back. We have no reason to say things like that. And
yeah.
But
then there's also that part about the reason why we talk about all the fetters as a wheel of identification is that it is 10 different ways to identify, but there are some of them that are bigger than the others. There are some of them that are more in your face and oh wow when you really realize it, and others that are like, oh okay, I get it. For example, the first one where we're identifying with a separate self, realizing that for a lot of people really is like, oh my god, there's nobody, there's no free will, there's no nothing, there's nothing of that. Oh wow, that is a big one. And the same with really, really understanding the bubble of reality, that everything you see here, smell, taste, touch, every communication you have with other people, everything is a reflection of you. It can never be anything that other people say. It can only ever be a reflection about your bullshit backpack and what you previously have experienced. When you really understand that, that is a big one as well. It's one of those, oh, wow. And you're just quiet for 2 weeks because you don't want to give anything away when you're in conversation with Janice, you know. But the other ones, they're very subtle shift. It's that looking at a plant and seeing a plant, and suddenly it's like, you're not looking at a plant anymore. You're looking at a vibration of light and color. That is more like oh, okay, I get it. Yeah. That unpinning, oh yeah, of course, there's not a separate self. So of course I can just unpin. Right. A lot of the others, they're very, very subtle. And if we go into this with an expectation of first feather falling, wow, explosion, fireworks. Second feather falling, I'm not my feeling and emotions. Oh wow, you know, and 10 of those is just not how it is. And a lot of them, we go through the feathers, and the more proficient you become with the feathers, the more you can juggle them in every single moment. So you can see, oh wow, there's a 6 happening right now. Oh wow, now there's a 2 happening. Now there's a 5 happening, and you can meet it with the proper tools in the situation that you're in. So you're jumping around in it. But the more you do that, the more proficient you get, the more subtle are the insights going to be. They're more profound, but they will be more subtly experienced.
Yeah, and I just wanted to reinforce like what you just said, where if you're looking at a plant and it's just light and vibration, that you are probably you've probably heard beforehand. Like when you say it's like, oh yeah, okay, it's because you've heard somebody say something about it. Like you have an idea of what you're looking for. When we're doing the Fetter stuff, why it's helpful in some ways is that it gives you some sort of expectation or some sort of idea of what you're looking for, and then direct ways to see it for yourself, and then, oh, okay. But it would be different if you were just out meditating on a hillside for 30 years, and then all of a sudden everything is just light and vibration, and you like have no framework for it, and you have no context for that experience. That becomes very jarring. But when we're telling you that it's possible, if you just look at something a certain way, to see it this way, if you relax and you do blah 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 blah, and then you have this experience, it's just confirming what you've already heard and what you expected. So there's like a benefit to having those limited expectations of things are not as they are. Here are some ways to see that they are not as they are, or other ways to experience them. But then don't get caught into, but my version of that has to be what they express.
It's all about,
yeah, or that it's going to be the way that I imagine it to be. It's just to point you in the right direction. You experience something different from the way that you've already always locked into, this is what a plant looks like, this is my interaction with the plant, it's always going to be that interaction with the plant. Um, but it's less, it's more like what you said, that, oh yeah, it's interesting, I can see that, because you knew what you were looking for ahead of time.
Yeah.
It's not just a jarring.
Yeah. We're coming back to that one more in a moment. I want to say something when we get to that.
Okay. Are we ready to go on?
Yes. Can you find awareness and consciousness in your direct experience, or are they conceptual? There's this idea when we talk about these things that, first of all, that we can express it with words. So when we talk about awareness and consciousness and all of that, we are putting some concepts and some labels on to support and help you, like Todd just talked about, with where we can point to that reality isn't the way that you assume reality is. There are reasons to why you assume reality is as it is, and there are certain ways that we perceive reality based on what we have been taught. To explain that, in a lot of ways, people often talk about awareness and consciousness, and that they are like differentiations and different levels, and it's only to point you to that reality is not what you think it is. But then it very often becomes into its own thing. So awareness is now something. Awareness is something else than a thought about what you're experiencing, which is not. Awareness is just you having an unfiltered experience, but you have thoughts about that you have an unfiltered experience. That is awareness. And the same with consciousness. Consciousness is when you no longer have any of your bullshit backpack and your toxic starting points and all of that in it, and it's just that pure expansive. But that, hang on, it's a concept. It's a thought about an experience, and both awareness and consciousness are concepts. It's not real. It can't be real. It's a pointing to an experience. And the catch 36 that we get into is that we kind of like, we're biting our own tail trying to look into what awareness and consciousness is, and having more thoughts about what awareness and consciousness is, and then we're just identifying more with thoughts about what we think that awareness and consciousness is, and we're completely caught in mental fabrications. It's just the mind thinking about things, which is not awareness or consciousness. Both are just a concept, just like a toothbrush or a car tire or a bicycle bell, strawberry. It's just a concept. It's just something we call it, which is not real. Just like the feathers are not real.
And I would say even a step further to that you can find something that is a strawberry. Obviously the idea of a strawberry is a concept. The name is a concept. The idea that you can see this one unique thing and know that it is a strawberry, whereas, this strawberry does not look anything like this supposed strawberry. Like that part of it is conceptual. But you can still eat the thing. Like there's still something that tastes like something. There's something that feels like in the experience. With awareness and consciousness, the problem is that we don't have a good unified description or definition.
No,
of
none
those
of
words
us agree on what it is.
Exactly. Every tradition calls them something else or uses the names either interchangeably or to mean very distinct things depending on their own personal variations of belief systems.
And traditions,
traditions and experiences. But the question is, like we asked there, and like you were saying, if you were to be just in your direct experience without any idea that consciousness or awareness could be a thing, would you find it? Like, is this here on its own? Is it something where you, and I think now that I say this, I'm actually pointing to the next one.
You're pointing to the next pointer.
The next pointer already. But they're very much interrelated. But even if you feel like you started out as, okay, I'm this contracted little me, then I saw through that, and what am I? Well, I'm the face before my parents were born. I am the the spaciousness in which everything is happening. I am the awareness that is always here, that has always been present. Okay, so feel that difference of the experience, but then really get into what is your actual experience of what you take to be that which was there before your parents were born, or that which is this the awareness of this moment, or this ever-present consciousness, or however you are choosing to define it or express it. Feel that which is taken as being the most fundamental thing in the universe, and then find out in your direct experience, how is that being felt, known, seen, heard, smelled, tasted? Because we don't sense things outside of our sense fields.
Yeah.
Like, you can have this idea that it's but it feels energetic, it feels vibratory, it feels okay, so you're feeling something. If you're using the words that I feel this thing, you are feeling something. What are you feeling? Perhaps it has to do with the fact that in the past you felt contracted and constricted, and so you were attributing those sensations, those felt sensations, which are in the muscles, which are in the fascia, which are in blood flow and movement of eyes and so on. That was taken to be me. Now maybe you're feeling more of this ever-present vibratory feeling that's in the body, or that is somehow seems to be outside the boundaries of a body. That is being felt. And instead of just being, well, this is just another sensation, this is now being misattributed or categorized as, but that is the feeling of awareness. How do you know that? It's really coming back to, what do you actually know, and how much of it is something that you are just labeling because of something you've heard before, or
which we talk about in a moment.
Which we probably should just go right into, right? Do you have more on this aspect of it?
No, we can read the next one and then go back to it, because it's just this pointer here is pointing to that if you in any way believe that awareness or consciousness is a thing, there's something for you to look into.
Yeah.
If you believe that, but hang on, awareness is when I close my eyes and I feel how my feet are tingling, and then I dissolve the feet, and then I dissolve, and there's just no body anywhere, and it's just tingly sensation. That is awareness. And then I can sit and be aware of that awareness, and that is awareness of awareness. There's a huge difference in sitting and having an experience without any thoughts about it, without any words about it, but just sitting and having an experience of tingling sensation, the body dissolving, but you're not putting any words on it. You're not explaining, which is a verbal indicator. You're not explaining in any way what is happening. It's just an experience that is happening in this moment right now. The moment you start to explain, the moment you start to put labels on it, concept on it, this is awareness of awareness, we're now back in thought. You have created a label about your experience, which is not the experience. It's a label about the experience. And then we can sit and talk about our labels from now into kingdom come. Nothing will ever be the experience. We're talking about the labels of it. There is no such thing as awareness. There's no such thing as consciousness. It's labels that we're putting on. And it's fine to talk about the labels, but we can't confuse the labels with the experience. We need to keep those two apart. And we can sit and talk about the labels from now into kingdom come, completely fine, knock yourself out, but it's not what we are talking about. In the 8th fetter, we're pointing to going beyond concepts, going beyond the label and the post-it that you put on it, and just have that experience that is not explained in any way, that is just experienced.
And notice also, it's not just in the felt sense field. It's also if you feel like there's feel again. Notice if when you are seeing things, there's an assumption that because a visual experience is happening, I must be aware of it, or there must be awareness that is registering the fact that it is there. There is a knowingness that this is a phone and not a flower. there is and that is taken to be something primordial, something that, okay, well, that's what awareness is, or that's what consciousness is, that there's a thing here and there's something here which is meeting it and is creating that knowingness of it. And it's to recognize that no, look in the experience, can you find anything that knows that this is a phone? There is a thought which might pop up, but that thought does not indicate that there is this knowingness. We have the visual representation of it, but is there anything separate from the visual representation? And is there any such thing as an awareness of that visual field? You can have, again, a thought and then another thought and then another thought, and each one of those are an individual thing, which on their own are self-known. There's still nobody in you or in the body or in this space of awareness or consciousness that knows that thought, that hears it, that interprets it, that does all of that. This is all subconscious, biological, under the radar stuff that it seems mystical to us because we don't really know how it happens. We can't experience that. Like science is now starting to give us clues as to, how the brain is constructing some of these things. But because in our direct awareness, it seems like thoughts just appear and thoughts are just known. And that when I look around, the world is just there. And there is something which seems to like know it, recognize it, be aware of the fact that it is there, be aware of the fact that it is aware. All of that, if we don't investigate it deeply enough, seems to be proof that, of course, there is something here. Maybe it's a soul. Well, okay, maybe it's not a soul. Maybe it's awareness then. Maybe it's ever-present consciousness. But these are just...
Yeah. And it's wild, for example, when you hear Bernardo Castro, where he says that there is consciousness, that is undeniably true, that there is consciousness. It is exactly what Todd talks about, that there is an arising of an experience. But when we put a label on that and saying that is consciousness, that is undeniably true, we're creating something out of nothing, because we do not know where that is. There is an arising and there's an experience of arising. And let's just stop the game there. Just stay in that direct experience right now, because before you start to formulate what it actually is, the moment has passed and we're talking about labels and post-its now. We're no longer talking about the direct experience. So I'm not saying that there's something wrong in sitting and talking about what consciousness and awareness is. It's completely fine and it's super interesting. And there's so many people that are really diving into all those thought experiments and are talking hours and hours and hours about what they think that is. But it is still a thought. It's not the direct experience anymore.
Yeah, it's effectively a bit like people playing Dungeons and Dragons.
Yeah.
And it's like completely immersed in this thing, and it feels very real because you're creating this whole world, and it's like super, super real. But at the same time, when you step up from the table, it's just...
When you snap out of the conversation about that direct consciousness is the utter truth, and when you step out of that into your direct experience, then you see that it's something you snap out of, and you come into what is alive in this moment. I mean, then you are sitting and having all those deep conversations about consciousness being true and awareness of awareness, and then you get a fly in your eye, and suddenly you're snapped out of it right away because you're back into the now, right now, in your felt experience as a fly in your eye, and it's the only thing that you're focused on, because everything else was just mental fabrications.
Yeah.
Let's go see the other one.
Yeah, which we've pretty well covered already. But
No. I got more to say about this.
So sixth pointer. If you had never heard about any given concept, would you have arrived at the same conclusion in your own experience?
Yes.
And that was kind of what I was saying, is that in your direct experience, if you were sitting here and you have, you're sitting on a mountaintop and you have never had any religious or spiritual training at all, you've never heard any concepts about any of this, you're just sitting there and observing the world around you. would you have ever come to the conclusion that awareness is ever present, that there's a thing called awareness, that there is this unlimited, all universal consciousness? Would you be able to tell that these things existed if you hadn't picked them up from some sort of tradition, some teacher, some book that you've read, some idea that seems very, very tantalizing because it's comforting, because there's something that is resonant enough with your experience and with your hopes to get out of a certain experience, or the things that you would like to be. You would like to be in a world where there is universal consciousness and nothing ever dies and nothing's ever separate, and we all just go back to that universal oneness. That is lovely. But could you have come to that completely on your own, just by looking at the world around you, and not by making mental conceptualizations about the world around you, like, oh, everything sucks if there's war and blah, blah. Not that. Just looking at your direct experience. How do you have any inclination that there is such thing as awareness or consciousness, separate from just the absolute arising of the moment?
And this is also the point that is really, really helping you looking into your expectations about awakening, what awakening is for you. Because those concepts and beliefs that you have are put in a place and put in to be more real than what your actual experience is in your direct experience. And so this pointer is very much about sussing out, are you sure? Is this a concept or a belief, or is this what is actually true in your direct experience right now? So when you're sitting and meditating, or you're sitting and looking out in nature, and you're sitting and having that expansive feeling of just unity and belonging to everything, you can ask yourself the question, are you sure? Are you sure this is what is happening right now? Or is this something that you have been taught, that you have heard us say a million times about unity and expansiveness? Is that the label you're putting on it right now? Or is what you're actually experiencing completely different? Because what we want you to really become aware of is that because we have the internet, because we have all of those inputs, we're not sitting in a mountaintop isolated in a cave only listening to one teacher, and that is the truth. We have the internet now. You have so many different inputs all the time, and that is, whether you're conscious about it or not, shaping how you perceive your own awakening. And if you sit out in nature, let's say in front of a tree, or looking at a little ant working, and you have a label that you put on it, this is awareness, this is consciousness, this is oneness, I feel one with the ant. How did you come up with that idea? That you feel one with the ant, or you feel one with the tree? You have heard that. And now you're playing out an expectation instead of actually being present right now with just this experience right now. Because before you can even start to create a little story about you being one with the ant, the moment has passed. The now is not a now anymore. The now is in the past, and you're creating labels about it. So this pointer is very, very much about you becoming blatantly aware. Are you leaning on beliefs and concepts, or are you actually in your direct experience, alive and awake right now?
Yeah. And I guess a caveat is, if you're somebody who, for you, religious faith is very important, and it's something where you feel destabilized or uncomfortable with the idea that something that you've had for maybe years or your entire life might not be true, then disregard this. We're not saying that there's any judgment or that there's anything wrong with having some sort of religious faith or belief. If you need that, if that serves a purpose for you,
if it makes sense, and that's where you feel that this is it. This is it.
This is more, if you start to see the holes in that armor, when you start to have that feeling that this might not be the infallible truth that I took it to be, because so much of what we take on in our daily lives from the time that we're children, both in the religious world and the political world and just in the social, cultural world, is a bunch of beliefs about how things are and
Who I
conceptualizations
am.
who I am, but also what's right and what's
Yeah.
wrong. And they're things which we never actually experience in our own direct way. It's something that we've been conditioned into. And especially in the religious world, there is a lot of faith being the most important thing, because just because it goes against common sense, or just because you can't see it with your own eyes, doesn't mean it's not real.
Mm.
And there's that, wasn't Donald Rumsfeld, I think, who said, the absence of evidence is not the evidence of absence. And you can take that on and really have that overwhelming sense of doubt that just because I can't see it doesn't mean it's not real. And that's again when we get to the 10th fetter, with just this complete openness of, we do not know. But the question is, would you have ever thought that this was a possibility if somebody hadn't already indoctrinated you?
Yeah.
If they hadn't taught you this? Is this something that you would come up with on your own from your own experience? And if not, then it seems reasonable, if you are okay letting go of past cultural baggage and past philosophical teachings and things that you maybe have leaned on for many years. Is it okay to start letting that go and just be aware of what is in your direct experience, what is present for you, and do you need to make something more out of it? Do you need to make some sort of lifelong belief, some identification out of being one who believes a certain thing as opposed to something else? Really see why this is important for you, why you've been holding on to it, and if you can let go of it, would you have ever come up with this on your own?
I just want to circle back to the caveat again.
Yeah.
That if you have that feeling that, yes, I would have come up with my own, that I am connected with the trees and the universe and the cosmos, and yes, the foundation in all of us is love, and we are all connected, and I am part of of everything. Yes, that is where I'm at. That is perfect. Stay there, because like we talked about previously, that when we have this idea that we're taking 2 steps forwards and 1 back, that we cannot know that that is actually a step taken back. Very often it is moving us further. Where you're at right now, it's completely fine to stay, because you do not know what it is you need to pick up there.
Mm.
If there's like a grander scheme of things, which you probably believe that there is, then stay there. There is something that you need to pick up. There's something that needs to be understood in a different way before you work with all these things. So there's nothing wrong. It's really not to sound patronizing or anything when we say it. There is nothing wrong to stay where you are at, because there's something that needs to be understood. There's something that needs to be integrated in a different way that you haven't been open for before. So wherever you're at, we're warm spokespeople of where you're at is exactly where you're supposed to be. And just notice, what is it that is alive in you right now? That is where suffering ends and where discontent ends, because you're just here.
And then I would also say too, if you are going to go beyond that, because that's lovely, but if you are, and you're curious to investigate, and even if you have an experience, like you said, where you feel like you're one with the cosmos and all of that, notice again, even if it feels like a sense of expansiveness, are you in your mind seeing a picture of the cosmos? Like, what is how do you have a sense of being bigger than anything from the perspective where you are?
Yeah.
How much of that is still imposed by thought? that I feel like I stretch out as far as the ends of the universe, but you can't see that. You can't,
in your direct experience, you don't even know about the cosmos. You don't even
exactly.
know about you stretching anywhere.
No, no. And the feeling of being one with somebody else or one with everything, even that in itself, how are you feeling that? You don't, can you actually feel what the other person is feeling in that, or the other tree or the other mountain or whatever else is feeling? Or is this still your own perspective and your own experience happening here? It's really being aware of how much you're taking whatever your experience is. And it might just be that you've been, for so many years, felt this limited boundary of the body. And now all of a sudden the boundary is gone. And so there's an assumption that what I'm feeling is, as boundaryless, far out as the imagination can go. Recognize you're still using imagination. However you are interpreting it, recognize that that is an interpretation and not the actual thing. There was, I thought there was another part of it like that you had said that, but I can't remember exactly how you phrased it now. But
old man.
I know. I really need to just like write things down as soon as I hear them because they're just gone 10 seconds later.
Yeah.
But anyway, all of which is to say, just be aware of, even in those experiences, if you take it on to be the proof of something that sounds really grandiose, is the way that you're experiencing it purely experiential, and how much is it still being amplified and enhanced by some sort of concept or thought,
belief,
or visualization, something else that is not actually here right now.
Good.
Okay.
Next pointer. How much of your experience of oneness is felt physically and how much is conceptual?
I think we just
talked about that. But it's again pointing into that when we talk about direct experience, we know that in our direct experience we have the seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, touching. But we have an extra layer on that. Also what we talk about in Buddhism, that there's an extra layer of that, where there's the thought about the seeing and the thought about the hearing and the smelling and the tasting and the touching. So there's a difference in those two, because one is in your direct experience, and that experience is ever changing all the time. There's an aliveness in it, there's a permanence in it, and it's happening, it's renewing itself now, because the receptors and everything, the entire experience is, we don't know actually what it is, but the entire experience is changing now, so quick. And then there's the thought about what we see, hear, smell, taste, touch. And that is what just talked about, that when we have this feeling of being part of the cosmos, being part of that expansiveness of the universe, that is a thought about something, a concept that we already know. What we would like for you to start to practice is to be in your direct experience of the seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, touching, and not thoughts about it. But just being in that direct experience where there's nothing attached to it. And that is what we've talked about a lot of times, is where you're really setting yourself free, and you're really setting others free, because you are allowing whatever is present in this moment to be as it is. Nothing in this moment needs to be any different, because it already is different. There's nothing that needs to change, because it already did change. Everything is happening so quick.
Every time your eyes move that little fraction of an inch, the visual field is different. Every time the blood is moving in the body, or the nerves are being nerve signals are being sent differently, the experience is different.
It changes all the time. And what we would like for you to do is really slow down and zoom in and see if you can close your eyes, or sit with your eyes open, sit out in nature, or sit in a soundproof room. No matter where you are, the experience will change now. And when you slow down and zoom in, you can practice noticing that, noticing the impermanence that is happening all the time. Because in that, and now it's getting really big, in that change that is happening, there's a new death happening now. There's a death and a birth happening all the time in that That's also about the rebirth that we talk about in Buddhism as well. That rebirth that is happening, there's a death and a rebirth happening now, because you're, like Todd is saying, your eyes are moving and new visual imprint is there. So you need to do an update, a reboot, because you keep getting new inputs all the time. The moment you start to have thoughts about what you see, hear, smell, taste, touch, you are no longer in your direct experience. You are in thoughts about it. And that is where the mental formations come in. And those are the ones that needs to really be seen through.
Yeah.
Okay, good.
8th pointer. Do you see the connection with identification with thought and the sense of an expansive I? So again, we're kind of touching on these same things again and again in different ways.
It's just different angles to it.
Yeah. So, when you were locked into the first fetter, you really had a deep belief in the thoughts of whatever thoughts are in the mind. That's me thinking them. That's me saying them. They're about me. Everything is self-referential. The body is me. All of that is just very clearly defined as me. It's what I take myself to be. Once that has been seen through, and then you are now in this more expansive, open, blissful, united kind of experience, as we've been harping on this whole time, the issue is that there are thoughts coloring all of this. You can't have you can't have any conceptualization about oneness or beingness or awareness or consciousness or unity or any of those things without some sort of thought about it. And so even that idea that it's this expansive big S self, the big I, that has to be another thought and another concept that's being bought into just as much as in the first fetter it was, well, if I don't pay my taxes, something bad is going to happen to me, and I have to go get the car fixed, and I have to do this, and I don't like that. And all of that was there. That has just been sublimated to a more larger ethereal ghost in the sky, where you've taken what once was believed to be a little me, and you've just said, okay, well, it's not that. It's not those little mundane things. It's actually this bigger thing that I am. And now I don't have to worry because taxes don't matter and nobody needs to drive a car if they don't exist. It's fine. And so then that can actually become dangerous as a way of bypassing if we get locked into that kind of conceptualization, because now all of a sudden the body doesn't matter, life doesn't matter as it is. I have this new life in the sky with everything else, and I'm one with everything, and nothing can harm me. And even though that is a lovely place to be and it feels great, this is why you talk about the self-care for the non-self, because there's still this duality that we live in terms of there is a practical side of life where a body still does exist and it still has a job and families and all of these things. And you can have these experiences where that really doesn't seem to matter. And it really seems like this is just play acting and it's a role that we're going through, and it's all interacted with in a much more light and open and non-important kind of way. But recognize that even that idea that this isn't my true home, that is my true home, that's just more identification with thought on the same level as you had in the first fetter.
Exactly. And again, then, if you can feel when we talk about this, that you start to get uneasy, that it doesn't feel comfortable and nice, then don't do this. There's no point. There's something that you need to pick up where you're at, pick it up, and then you can always return to working with this. But it's also that if you have that idea that you're not afraid of dying, because there is something more, there is a God that has you, there is the universe, and you're just, the atoms of you are just, and the consciousness in the atoms are just going to return to the big atom in the sky that all of us are, and then you're going to be reborn into a new atom form where it's selfing. It's selfing. You're just using fancier words. It's still selfing. It's still being concerned about this little I that is not behind the wheel, and that is very, very disconcerting, and that is why we do not want that. So now we're starting to talk big words instead of just looking at it's still just identification. Can you be in a body where that unease is happening? Can you feel that contraction that is happening? That is nothing but a contraction.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean that you are doomed or damned or anything like that. It's just a contraction in the body. There's a sensory experience happening in the body, and that's it.
Yeah. Yeah. So see if you are doing these or believing these things or locking on to these beliefs because there is a feeling of relief, potential for bypassing, a way of not having to investigate some perhaps deeper fears or deeper insecurities that are underneath it.
Mm-hmm.
It's just an invitation to take it one step deeper, because just as we talked about earlier, that the issue is belief is great as long as that belief holds out. And as soon as that belief starts to have any sort of doubt mix in with it, once there's any question about whether I'm as solid in this belief as I thought I was or not, that's when suffering really can kick in. And especially if you have these beliefs because they are about bigger topics of mortality and illness and all of those things. When the rubber really meets the road is when you need to know that you are stable in your understanding and stable in this thing. And if you have to rely that belief is going to hold out until the moment of injury or illness or death, it's a good reason to make sure that you are really, really solid, either with the belief or without the belief. Because if there's any fluctuation in there, that's when real suffering happens.
So this one is really looking into the identification with thought that is still happening. That even when you think that what you're thinking is not thoughts because it's awareness or consciousness or whatever, is still is thought, and there's still a little I in there that is experiencing those thoughts. That identification can be seen through, and that is leading us to the next question. I just want to applaud you for saying when the rubber meets the road, because Todd, he normally says when the non-rubber is meeting the non-road. So this was a very, very big moment.
We're back in the practical world here. This is on the relative level where there's still rubber and roads and people driving cars and people who are getting sick and dying. You gotta make it consistent.
Well done.
Thank you for that.
Okay, next point. And that is actually going a level deeper, where have you discovered which sensory experiences are creating the kernel of an I? And I talked a bit about it in the 4th lesson here in the 8th Fetter, where it's noticing that we can have all the fetters can have fallen up until the 8th Fetter. All 7 have fallen. We have worked with the 8 as well, where we still have that kernel of an I that is sitting in here and experiencing all that Advaita picture you've probably seen with the eyes looking through, the consciousness looking through the eyes.
Like through a mask.
Yeah, looking through a mask. So there's like consciousness looking through or awareness looking through. And we can have that feeling of that, looking through. So we are unpinning and everything with all that is sorted, but we still have that contraction of kernel of an I, a feeling of an I. And that's what we're going to talk about in this pointer, which that is nothing but muscle contraction. And I know when you hear it the first time, you go like, what? It's not. I know, I can feel that there is a kernel. There's something that has been here since before I was born, that has been here in previous incarnations. That is a thought that can be looked through. But I can feel that there's like, I am here, but that is a contraction. So let's look into it. Do you want to do that?
Sure.
Putting you on the spot here, because it's because you've done it with Daryl as well. I think you did. Yeah. Otherwise, I did it. I can't remember. But is that really? Do you want to do it?
I mean, yeah. Either way.
Go on.
Well, okay. So Well, it's also is what I was kind of pointing to before, and so if you feel into, well, close your eyes.
Yeah. Okay, let's do it.
Let's do
Let's do
this.
it.
Close your eyes and get a sense for where you feel like you are most located in the body. Now, if you're still working through the first fetter, then
This
notice if
is
you
not the
say,
lesson for you.
yeah, no. But even if you feel like you are past the first fetter, just try this out and say your name for a moment and see if anything lights up. You might also want to say me, I, words that seem to be self-referential. And notice where your attention is drawn. A lot of people will find sensations behind the eyes, in the face, in the chest, maybe in the throat, but feel whatever is there. And when we're talking, especially on the first fetter level, which again, be honest, even if you think you're past that, is there still something showing up for you there? Notice what you're actually feeling. Are you feeling muscular tension? Are you feeling a sense of movement? Are you feeling the air coming in and out through the nose, into the windpipe, down into the lungs? Are you feeling the expansion and contraction of the chest and the diaphragm? Are you feeling tension in the throat? Are you hearing an internal voice which is actually being felt happening also in the micro movements of the jaw and the tongue and the larynx? Are you feeling movement in the eyes? Are you feeling vibration around the eyes or the muscle tension around the eyelids and the brow? This is just to start to become aware more and more of the sensations which are being felt all the time, which are so habitual that they tend to be thought of as me. These are institutions in my existence that prove that this must be where I'm located. And so without putting that assumption on top of them, just notice what is here. And the more you pay attention to it, see if that starts to dissolve along with the concepts. The sensations can be there, but the meaning of those sensations does not need to be. The meaning of those sensations is imposed over top of them. So let that go.
May I just say
sure.
something? If you still are sitting with your eyes closed, if you can't really feel into what it is Todd is talking about, then I would like for you to focus on your eyes right now. And you're sitting with closed eyes and feel the muscles in the eyes. Because even though you're sitting with closed eyes, your eyes are moving. It's a very, very subtle movement that is happening. Do you feel it? That little movement is enough for you to feel I am here behind my eyes, because there's a very, very subtle movement in the muscles. Go on.
And if you're feeling that, and you're feeling those sensations behind the eyes, notice then if it feels like you are witnessing those feelings from someplace else. Is there an assumption there, or perhaps a felt sense, that I am viewing that from someplace other than within that movement of the eyes themselves? And you can start tracing these things back to, okay, is that another felt sensation? Is it perhaps a more subtle felt sensation than the gross tension that we were talking about, or that more intense movement? But there's still this feeling that I am aware from someplace different from where this is happening. And so you can take into account your visual field, even with the eyes closed. Notice if there are thoughts that are showing up, showing images of the eyes, showing images of the body, showing images of something from a certain distance. Anytime you experience this idea of awareness that I am someplace other than, Notice if that's being accompanied by an image of what has been experienced, seen from a certain vantage point. And then follow it to that vantage point where it seems to be being seen or known. And is there anything there that can be witnessed? Is that just being found and now visualized by yet another vantage point? Is this something where there is an infinite regress, where we keep looking from one place to another place, to another place, to another place, without being able to find the actual witness? And then in your felt experience, do you notice these more expansive feelings? They're less constricted, less central into the core of the body, and perhaps more around the periphery of the skin. If you've already lost the feelings of boundaries of the body, then notice if these things are happening still within a general perimeter, somewhere within a couple feet of what you take to be the body. If the mental images are still adhering all of those sensations into a general form in the shape of something vaguely human, see if you can let that go and allow those sensations to just show up wherever they want to show up, not bound into any sort of relationship to each other or to where you take yourself as the core of this experience. Just allow sensation to be. And then any sensations that arise that seem to be imposing an idea that I am aware in this moment of these sensations, that I am separate from these sensations. Where can that be found outside of thought? Is it yet another more diffuse physical sensation that you are feeling? Are they happening someplace separate in a different dimension than these felt sensations that seem to just be boundless and floating around in no space? Is there a mental image that is accompanying it? Is there an auditory thought that is saying that this is awareness, that I am everywhere, that I am aware of this, I know I'm aware of this? Recognize those. And is there something separate from that auditory thought that says I am awareness, that knows and recognizes and understands that thought? I am awareness. Is there anything outside of another thought or another felt sensation somewhere in this spatial realm that seems to be knowing or aware or consciousness? Anything that shows up, track it down, feel it as it shows up in the direct experience without the thought imposed upon it. And then see if all of a sudden there is another thought which is pointing you into another direction. And you can do this anytime you want, just to keep getting back to if there really is a root that is in awareness or consciousness or anything stable, or if it's just a constant maze of one new image, one new sensation showing up after another, after another, after another, each one claiming to be something which it is not. You can open your eyes when you're ready.
That was wonderful.
Oh, thanks, babe.
You really, really rock these inquiries.
You
really do. I can warmly recommend you, if you haven't been already, to go to Todd's channel. It's not Todd's channel, but it's
where most of the inquiries
a lot of the
lie.
inquiries and meditation. So it's Unfettered Mindfulness here on YouTube, where you can find all the inquiries and meditation. That was really, really good. It's also where you find the recordings for our Tuesday group.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right.
That was wonderful.
Thank you. Last one. 10th pointer. Do you know that the memories you have are false memories and not about the person you believe yourself to be right now? And so why this is important is because, again, we've been talking about this throughout this talk, that there is a feeling of one who has passed the first fetter and who has dealt with desire and aversion and has now beyond them. They've freed themselves from the shackles of craving and ill will. And now, this one has had these experiences where everything, the distance is broken down and everything starts to feel very unified and all of that. And there's an idea there that there is one person who is making this journey across all the fetters, across the time and across all of the practice, and is starting out as this deluded, suffering little being who is now becoming expansive and one and freeing himself of all of these delusions, freeing himself of all of the suffering to become a better one with a big O. And maybe isn't there yet, but will be in the future. And the idea that this is creating this artificial timeline, this artificial linearity that I have been and I'm going to be, what we want to do is look into where is that one? Even if it's pointing to, well, this is the awareness that's always been there. It's been there before I was born. Well, then how is that supposed to be following this journey? Even if there was this ever-present awareness or all-knowing consciousness, how is that going through the steps of the fetters? How has it been sullied and suffering and delusional and now is not? And so really be aware of the beliefs that you're taking on in this, and then investigate. If I have a memory right now of being very, very aggressive in the past, very angry, very quick to trigger, and now I don't feel that anymore, what is it that has been consistent from that point till now? How does it feel like there is any sort of connection between this moment showing up in all of its raw experience and that memory of one who was getting very, very angry at a cashier and just, belting out some absurdity at the top of their lungs? Where is that connection? Right now, in your direct experience, there is no past. There is no indication that that ever happened. What there is a memory that shows up in this now as perhaps an auditory sound in the mind where you hear a voice yelling at somebody. There might be a visual image, maybe even a little movie playing out of somebody interacting with a cashier. These things might happen in the mind, but we know that memories are greatly fallible. They're not actual records of something which has been recorded and is being replayed. They're refabricated every time they are seen. It's effectively imagination that has some relative basis in something that we could say has happened at some point, but it is so indefinable and so hard to tell what we have actually remembered, how accurate what we have remembered is to anything else. Like anybody else who is in that scene is going to have a very different memory of that situation. They might agree that there was a person yelling at a cashier, but the interpretations of it, what they said, how it played out, how long it played out, the visual experience of it from different angles, all of that is completely different. And there are some people who might not even remember it happening at all. So to be aware that these thoughts are not trustworthy, and then really feel into what it seems to be in your experience right now that is creating that filament, that is drawing that line between all of those memories that pop up and this moment right here. Is there anything that you can find that seems to feel consistent and coherent, that this has always existed, that this has lived a life that is now feels different, but still aware that this is still the same life? You had brought up that I had said to Daryl in one of our talks that, this body definitely did not appear from my mother. Like this did not get born, right? Like none of this appeared this way initially. This is something which is now This is the only time that this body has ever looked like this body, the way in this exact configuration. This is the only time that these cells have ever been like this, and the only time that they will ever be in this configuration. This is the only time that these particular thoughts have been this particular way.
Mm.
There is no unification between that and any other time on an imaginary timeline. But there is still, if you feel like there is still something here that says, oh yes, but I have been, I do remember all of these things. It does feel like I have been there. It's just a call to investigate.
Yeah.
What is that feeling of continuity?
I can't remember. I've been sitting and trying to remember who it is that said that memory is not created based on accuracy, but based on survival. And it's pointing to that second fetter, the way that we work with the second fetter, of looking into where that sense of an I was created, where that came from, because that you are causes and conditions. You were created by the stories and everything, but every single memory that you have is created based on your survival. And that's why we are so into looking at that in the second fetter, because that needs to dissolve. You need to let go of your story. You need to let go of the story about your childhood. You need to let go of all of that. So if there's if you still believe that there is something here that is permanent, it's a good idea to go back to the second fetter and work with it there, and work with the seventh fetter, because you need to dissolve the starting point. Normally we point to a toxic starting point, and we talk about that you're starting from an idea of fear, anger, guilt, and shame, and then you dissolve that in the second fetter. But then we get a different starting point where we do not have that go-to idea of something being set in stone, but we still have a starting point. Where we would like for you to be now is completely dissolved, so there is no starting point. There is an arising in this moment with whatever is present in this moment. There is no hooks into any previous memories or previous stories or previous preconceived concepts or beliefs. It's just an arising right now. So it's an arising without a starting point, because that is the beginning of the ninth fetter. It's where we would love for you to be when we start to work with the fetter of flow, which is the ninth fetter. So this last pointer is really, really pointing to you sussing out where is it that you believe that you come from. What is it in your memories that keep popping up that needs your compassion and your kindness to be able to dissolve, so you can be in that open space of no starting point.
Beautiful.
And that was the 10th.
And it was.
That was the 8th fetter.
I think that's a wrap.
Go you.
Go you. Go non-you.
Go non-you. It sounds like going nowhere.
Yeah, go nowhere.
I think that was it.
Yeah.
We hope you enjoyed it. Remember, we have inquiry groups, we have the Q&As, we have an amazing community on Discord that you can always lead on, and there are beautiful people in there that will guide you through all these things if anything comes up. Yeah, I think that was it. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.
Sorry. Inhaled. I think I inhaled that fly. That was just